Welcome back to the John List podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am your host. In today's episode, we are going to talk about what it was like for John when he went to school, what happened after he graduated, what he majored in college, and how his family came around. Okay, so when John was in school, he was very quiet, didn't interact with his classmates that much. He didn't have a lot of friends. They described him as very quiet, but gentle, but also very odd. So, during that time, when John List was in high school, that's when the war came around, and there were a lot of guys who left school to defend the country. Well, John's mother did not believe in war because of religious beliefs, and she would not let him drop out. So, after he graduated from high school, he actually served our country during the final years of the war. Now, I will have to do some research about this one part because he did receive a medal for serving our country, but he lied about why he received it. And let's just say there's a detail that he mentions in his interview that pretty much gives it away that he lied about how he received the medal. So you'll find out about that in the next episode. Okay. So anyway, while he was away, he received a message that his father, Frederick, had passed away. He was able to come home for the funeral, and everyone at the funeral described him as emotionless, didn't cry at all, pretty much showed no emotion whatsoever. And I understand that people handle grief in different ways, but the problem was John List was the kind of person that would never show emotion that much. Like, from the time that he was a kid, if something happened, he would suck it up and bury it. And I've also heard many times about how basically society says that the man is supposed to be the tough guy, not emotional, doesn't show any feelings whatsoever, because some people view it as weakness. No, not really. I actually like it when men are perfectly fine being emotional and sensitive. To be honest, I actually think it's kind of sexy. Now, let's see. All right. So what happened was, after the funeral, he returned to serve the country for a while. And then when he returned home in 1946, John went to college. He had received his degree in business administration, which is a degree that I have myself. And then he received his master's in accounting. Now, the interesting coincidence about that is when I was in school, it was very difficult for me to pick a major because everything that I wanted to do, it either required a very high level of education, or it was something I couldn't do because of my vision disability. Like, for example, I wanted to be a lawyer. I heard that it's very difficult to get into law school, and plus it's extremely expensive. And let's see, then I wanted to be a therapist, but I was told that I need my PhD, and I do not consider myself doctor material. And then there was a time when I wanted to be a cop, a forensic scientist, and stuff like that, but my vision got in the way of those career choices. So, believe it or not, I actually tried to major in accounting. I was always the kind of person that loved math and numbers, except, geometry. Yeah, that class was awful, but I loved algebra. Yeah. But let me just say, majoring in accounting is a lot harder than people think it is. So, to anyone who is an accountant, bravo, because unfortunately I could not major in it. I took 3 different accounting courses because I had to take them anyway for my business degree. And the third one, let's see, it was Accounting 1, Accounting 2, and Management Accounting. Now, unfortunately, management accounting was so complicated that I really cannot give you an example of something that we learned because it was so complicated that I don't even remember what it was. Like, for example, when we were trying to learn some of this stuff, I literally said to my professor that whoever came up with this stuff wasn't sober. I literally felt like we had to be drunk or high in order to understand it, which, by the way, I did not do that, by the way. So don't take that out of context. And to be honest, I don't think it would have helped anyway. So anyway, yeah. So after he received his degree in accounting, he moved to Virginia. And then in September 1951, he met a 25-year-old widow at the time named Helen Taylor. She had a 9-year-old daughter from her first husband who died at war. Her husband's name was Marvin Taylor. I do apologize. I can't remember if I told you her daughter's name. Her 9-year-old daughter's name was Brenda. Yeah, sorry, I haven't been sleeping well, so I completely forgot if I mentioned that detail or not, but anyway. So, yeah, what happened was they actually met at a bowling alley, and John thought that Helen was really nice, very pretty, and, they started talking, and there was an attraction, and it's also kind of complicated at the same time because the problem is Helen was the kind of woman that liked the finer things in life, and she was truly heartbroken when her first husband died, which is understandable. And she told her sister that she did not want to fall deeply in love with someone else with the possibility of losing him too. So I guess based on that, well, she said herself that John was more of a safe husband instead of like a Marvin 2.0, I guess. And her sister was suspicious of it because she was like, Helen, I know the kind of guy that you are usually attracted to, and John List is not it. And Helen said, John is safe. He loves me, and he wants to take care of me. Yeah, personally, I do not believe in those kind of relationships where you consider someone safe. I feel like you should be with someone because you love them. But, there are some things that both Helen and John made mistakes with, and we'll be discussing it from time off and on throughout the channel. So we're actually going to hop into one of them right now, actually. Because when they started dating immediately, they got married 3 months later. Now, I bet you're wondering, why did they get married so quickly? Well, Helen told John that she was pregnant. And it's kind of ironic. I am getting a little ahead of myself, but let me put it to you this way, because it needs to be said. John would always be upset with his wife or his kids if they were doing something that was against religious beliefs, but John and Helen were having premarital sex. So, yeah, just a little bit of a idea of how John's brain works. Okay. Yeah, so they got married 3 months after they started dating. And then after they were married, Helen told John that she was not pregnant. And that's when the resentment started. He felt like she said that as a trap to get him to marry her. But he did not believe in divorce. So he wanted to make the best of it. And then eventually they did start a family, as you can see. In 1955, they welcomed their beautiful daughter, Patricia, or as her friends would call her, Patty. And then 1 year later, John Jr. And then 2 years later, Frederick came along. Now, John List was the kind of person that did not believe in birth control. So it became a huge problem because what happened was after they had Patricia, Helen had 2 daughters and she didn't want to have more children. Well, she had a few miscarriages with John List, and then she had her 2 sons, but she wanted to stop after Patricia. But since John didn't believe in birth control, he said, we're going to leave it in God's hands. If we get pregnant, we get pregnant. Well, as we know, there are a lot of religious people who don't believe in birth control, and they also don't believe in taking medicine and stuff like that. I mean, and let me just say that, like I've mentioned before, I am a baptized Christian myself, and if you are not religious, there's no judgment here. I just ask for the same respect for my beliefs. And I'm not the kind of Christian that doesn't, I do believe in birth control. I do believe in taking medication if it does help you feel better, I think praying is important, but you see, the knowledge that people use to come up with these medications that help cure illnesses and stuff, I mean, those were gifts from God. And my own preacher even said that a month or 2 ago. So it's just a little something to think about. But if you still, don't believe in birth control or medication, no judgment. Okay, and one more thing I forgot to mention is, unfortunately, even though Helen loved her first husband, Marvin, very much, unfortunately, he wasn't always loyal to her. So while he was away serving the country, he cheated on her with prostitutes, and when Helen went to go visit Marvin, she ended up with syphilis. And I need to do some research on the disease because I don't know that much about that stuff. And the reason why I need to look into it is because when they went to the doctor later on, they found out that, well, according to John List, the syphilis caused the miscarriages, which I'm not sure if that's true or not, but yeah. And the thing is, I've heard different rumors. Either Helen didn't know that she had it, or she did know and she kept it a secret until around this time when the kids were teenagers, which isn't good. And unfortunately, because of that, Helen battled from very bad migraines, and because her brain was shrinking and it was slowly dying. So she became dependent on painkillers and alcohol. She was, she also smoked cigarettes, which obviously that isn't good either. So unfortunately, all those things together, all that did was aggravate it. It made it worse. It got to the point where Helen would stay in bed all the time, and I heard that she could even read 2 books in one day. Even I can't do that. Yeah, so with 3 children and a wife to support, John had a lot of different jobs throughout his career, but unfortunately it brought him very little success because it wasn't based on the work. It was because of his personality and the way he interacted with coworkers. So, yeah, he was always disappointed when he couldn't make it into management, which is understandable, because a lot of people are hoping to build their way up. Well, the problem is, even though you may be good at doing the work, you also have to have the social skills as well. And that was something that his mother did not teach him when he was a kid. So she claimed that she was trying to protect him from getting dirty and the evil of the outside world, but she just really set him on the bad track down the road. So, since John was constantly being fired from jobs, they would often move from state to state. And then, in the late 1960s, John List finally had the big opportunity of his life. He was offered the job as vice president of the National Bank in New Jersey. His career was finally on track. And he was very happy. And, since Helen was a big fan of the finer things, she wanted to take advantage of it. And here's the thing, would I consider Helen a gold digger? A little bit, yes, actually. But since she was in her room all the time, obviously we didn't have, websites that you can shop on and things like that back then. So I'm guessing that when she spent more money than John brought in, I'm assuming it was for the painkillers, the alcohol, and probably ordered stuff from catalogs and things like that. So, yeah, it's definitely not good when you spend more than you're bringing in, but at this point, I think we've all been down that road. Especially with the inflation right now. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Oops, sorry. Anyway, so they decided to move to New Jersey, and they started to look for a new home. All right, so as they were searching for homes, they came across this beautiful 19-room mansion. It was a Victorian home called Breeze Knoll. Now, Helen wanted this house, but John did not. She basically pressured him into buying it. The problem was John List needed $10,000 for the down payment. Now, if I remember correctly, back in the 1960s, this house was for sale for $150,000. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, Tanya, $150,000 for a mansion? Well, you have to remember, this was back in the 1960s. Today, a house like that would probably be costing over $2 million, I would say. Yeah, so what happened was, the only thing that John could do was to go to his mother and ask for the $10,000 for the down payment, which she wasn't crazy about at first. But the only way she would give him the down payment is if she would live in the house with the family. Now, John's mom and Helen did not get along. And Helen was not happy about this. But at the same time, Helen, I'm sorry, but you wanted this house and John couldn't afford it. So he found a way to make it work, but it was something that wouldn't make you happy, but, sorry. I hate it when both men and women, because I don't think it's just on one side, when they feel like they are entitled to things when they don't think about how much it costs or what you might have to do in order to make it work. So what happened was, it is a 3-floor house, so there is an apartment on the 3rd floor, and that's where John's mother lived. So I think most of the time his mother was upstairs, but just having her in the house really made Helen uncomfortable. But it's what John had to do. Yeah, so this house also included a ballroom. And there is a very important detail about that room in the ballroom that it is important to mention. So there was a skylight in that room that was rumored to be an original Tiffany, and it was worth a lot of money. Now, I bet you're wondering, why am I telling you that now? You'll find out later. Let's just say it's a very important detail. Okay. So, John List put down the down payment. They moved in. Everything seemed to be going pretty good. The List family was not very social, or at least John and Helen weren't. But the kids, they would play outside. Some of the neighbor kids would play with them. So I'm at least thankful that John's kids did not grow up the same way he did. But John wasn't happy about that either. And the neighbors would always say that John was very quiet, didn't like to interact with people. And even when he would mow the lawn, he would still wear his suit and tie. Yeah, I'm not kidding you guys. He would literally get dressed up in his work suit to mow the lawn. And he was a perfectionist. Everything had to be a certain way, and it was the same thing inside the house too. The neighbor kids who did interviews later, they described the kitchen as so clean, it's like no one ever cooked in it, even though that's not true. You know what I mean? So, yeah. He was definitely obsessed with things to be a certain way, which, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can turn into a bad thing. And I think based on John's personality, it was a bad thing. Well, unfortunately, 1 year later, John was fired from the bank for the same reasons, not work-related, but because of his personality. And according to John List, his pride prevented him from telling his family that he was fired, which I think was a big mistake. I mean, yeah, his family would probably see him as a failure, like he has been with his other jobs, but the problem is, you bought this big mansion because you had a vice president job, but then when you lose the job and you still have this big mansion to pay for, what do you expect to do? And especially with Helen being a big spender, he should have said something. But the truth is, I heard that 2 out of his 3 kids got jobs after school. It was Patricia and Freddie. So I'm kind of confused how they didn't know that John was fired. I really don't. So basically what happened was, John was trying to look for work. And what he would do, so that his family wouldn't be suspicious, he would get dressed in his suit and grab his suitcase. He would go down to the train station that actually existed. If you follow my first channel, the MJ Innocent podcast, then you understand the joke. So he would go to the train station and take the train a few stops so that people still thought that he was employed, doing well, He would read the paper every day to try to look for job opportunities, and then he would just come home and do the very same thing the next day, and so on and so forth. He did have a job selling insurance, but unfortunately he was fired from that job as well. So what he did was, as his mother's power of attorney, he was taking money from his mother's bank account, considering it a loan to pay bills, and then he thought to himself that he would put the money back later. Well, he still could not hold down a job, and by November 1971, he was facing bankruptcy. So that's when he started to think about his options. First, he was thinking about committing suicide, but he considered that mortal sin. He felt like if he committed suicide, he would automatically go to hell. And it wasn't just the fact that he couldn't hold down a job that was stressing him out. His wife, Helen, was fed up with the religious life. And she told John to remove her name from the membership rolls at church, which angered him. And that's an understatement. And then he was afraid that the kids would stop going to church. And his daughter, Patricia, who was 16 back in 1971, she was starting to hang out with the wrong crowd. She was doing pot. She was smoking cigarettes. There was a rumor going around that she was in an inappropriate relationship with her drama teacher, but I don't know if that is true or not. I need to look into that a little bit more because I do not want to give false information, but that is what I've heard. And speaking of her drama teacher, Patricia, she really wanted to be an actress. And again, it's against John's religious beliefs. And both John and his grandma, Patricia's grandma, Patty's grandma even said the theater is the devil's playground. I swear. And here's the thing. Considering, I understand that when people want to be an actor or an actress or whatever, I understand that there isn't a guarantee. It's not really stable work. But if she was really good at it, maybe she could have been a very successful actress. And plus, she was only 16 at the time. There was a time when I wanted to be an actress. But my parents, I come from a religious family. My parents were against it, but not based on religious beliefs. But after what I've heard about Hollywood, I'm actually glad that they wouldn't let me do it. So, yeah, and considering the fact that John couldn't hold down a job, I really don't think he's the kind of person who could judge his daughter based on her career choices. But like I said, she was only 16 at the time. She could have changed her mind. Anyway. Yeah, so he was afraid that she was going to go to hell because of these things. There was even a time where John List put a suit on and then had to go to the police station at the middle of the night to go pick up Patricia. So he was not happy at all. In that situation, that's actually understandable. Because no one wants their kids to do drugs or to smoke cigarettes, and all these other things. So it was just a big mess. So when he ruled out suicide, he then thought about abandoning the family and starting over. Well, unfortunately, that would leave Helen and the kids at the mercy of welfare. His pride ruled that option out as well, because based on his religious beliefs, he considered poverty a sin. I've never heard of such a thing, so I can't comment on that. So, at some point, according to List, he said that he didn't see any other choice. And he said, quote, "I kept thinking about it for several weeks, maybe even a month. And my final decision was, if I killed them, it would save them from any problems." Okay, so I think that's a good place to stop for this episode. In the next episode, I'm going to tell you about what happened on November 9th, 1971. 52 years ago today.